So welcome to this session. I think it's going to be fantastic. We've got a lot to discuss. Workforce issues have come up with a few other panels that we've had. And we have some educators, we have training providers, manufacturers, associations. So if you could each introduce yourself briefly, then we'll get going. Simon?
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Simon Azar. I'm Vice President of Strategy, Marketing, Digital Products, and New Adjacencies at CAE.
My name is Barry Butler. I'm president of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University.
Angelo Collins. I'm the new, as of 3 weeks ago, executive director of the Vertical Flight Society.
Congratulations. I'm Eric Fanning, the president and CEO of the U.S. Aerospace Industries Association.
Hi, I'm Tasha Perkins. I'm the Chief People and Partnerships Officer at Archer Aviation.
We're sharing. Hi, Lucy Prince. I'm Chief People Officer at Volocopter.
Thank you very much. To start off, what is needed to train flight crews, maintainers, ground operations? Senator?
Yeah, sure, I can take a crack at it as a training organization. So it begins with a training needs analysis. What we need to do is derive a task list, and from that task list, derive the competencies that are required. And that's what we've started doing with our partners. Once we have the competencies that are required, then we can think about the way that we're going to train those competencies, leveraging, obviously, simulators, leveraging training curriculums, so we'll develop the training curriculum, and then we'll leverage the means through which we'll deliver that training curriculum, whether it's electronic, whether it's leveraging technologies like virtual reality and simulation. And of course, we pull as much data as we can through these different curriculums so that we can make it as evidence-based as possible and as adaptive as possible to a progressing population.
Sounds good. Anybody else?
I'll say I wasn't sure if I was going to be the devil's advocate in the panel, but it's going to be very challenging to train. I mean, when you're talking about some of these aircraft, you're talking about optionally crewed, or maybe even unmanned, and okay, a single-rated pilot, one pilot in the aircraft. How do you train? If you don't have the seat for a co-pilot, what kind of simulators you're going to have to use and develop? And I worked on the F-35 program, which is a single-seat aircraft, and it's challenging and it's very difficult to get the confidence of the military or the FAA or EASA to accept the fact that, oh yeah, you had enough simulation hours, you can fly in this aircraft by yourself for the first time, or with the F-35, take off of a carrier for the first time by yourself, sitting in the aircraft for the first time by yourself. So I see it being a challenge. I see the industry obviously adapting to that and innovating, and I'm really excited to see that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I would add from our perspective in the phase that we're at, we're going to be opening up our manufacturing site in Q1 of 2024. So that's just 7 months away. So the big thing for us is the volume of training and the amount of training that we're going to have to do. Because as you know, we're going to be manufacturing these at a higher rate than traditional aerospace. So really leveraging the existing educational system, infrastructure, and training vendors all coming together to be able to create new content and programs fairly quickly here in the next 7 months to begin pushing those out and creating that pipeline.
I think as well it's important to note we are a nascent industry. We are new. We're doing something that has not been done before. So exactly this point is really important. We need to work with established partners. We need to make sure that we're talking regularly with the regulators so that what we are developing is indeed fit for purpose. And I think if we look at the people that we're developing, we need to make sure that there's a certain tolerance for ambiguity and for change, because we probably won't get it right every single time. So when we look at the softer skills, we need to be focusing on things like persistence, grit, resilience, and making sure that our workforces know that we will keep trying until we do get it right with those partners.
So sorry, go ahead, Barry.
No, I was going to add, Simon and said a few things that are very relevant. So we train a lot of pilots, no question about it, maintainers as well, which I think is part of this conversation. Simon hit on some very important points. Now, we take individuals who are just getting started in the piloting profession, but the things that he said are very important. Number one, you need to know what are the tasks that you need to train to or educate to. And right now, with the industry, and you look around here, drawing from the manufacturer is going to be really important for us to know, okay, what are those tasks? Secondly, you have to develop, obviously, the curricula or the lessons that you want to go through, and then, of course, deliver it, in whether it's in a simulated environment or, in our case, both simulation as well as a significant amount of actual flying. An important part to that for us is the iterative process. You have to learn from what you think is right, and then fix it and keep doing it over and over again. And I think that's where, in this industry, as it evolves, we're going to have, as was stated, a really good partnership between the manufacturers. And I think those of us that have been involved in educating the operators and the maintainers, we've been at it for over 90 years. And yes, this is a sort of a revolutionary change, but there's been other changes over time. And I think part of that process of being a good educator is the consistent feedback loop, and trying to make sure that if you think you're teaching them something right and it's not quite right, you fix it and you keep making it better and better over time.
I don't mean to jump ahead, because I think we're going to get to this later, but in order for there to be training, there have to be people to be trained. And we are already working in an environment with real workforce shortages issues. So I think we have to address that as well, to make sure that we are priming that pump to get to this training process that we're putting in place.
So we need people, and we need training standards, but where are we from a regulation standpoint? What does the EASA and FAA mandate right now? And from a manufacturer standpoint, what have you established?
So the FAA for us in the United States, obviously a critical component. We could start with getting a confirmed administrator. But when we talk about and making sure that they have the right workforce, we spend a lot of time talking about industry workforce, but we need to make sure our government partners, because we can't do this without them, have the right workforce as well, and that they have modern systems and a modern way of thinking about certifying technology, but also people and pilots, going back to thinking more creatively and more forward-looking about how we use simulation, which is entirely different than even I come out of the Pentagon side of the equation than I experienced when I was there 10 years ago. And we've got to get at that, have that conversation, get people comfortable with it, because we're not going to be able to do it otherwise. I mean, our studies continually show the two long poles in the tent for this all to be real. One is consumer acceptance, which just means we're going to have more pilots than we need for a while until people get comfortable flying in things that don't have pilots. But the regulatory process, it's always the thing that slows us down. And the iterative loop of technology and the delivery of these new capabilities just gets faster and faster and faster. So we need the regulators to think that way too.
Yeah, I was just going to add, from a manufacturing standpoint, that's certainly something we've been thinking about for over a year now, because we knew it would be difficult with this coming so quickly to get all of that training underway. So for us, that was why Stellantis, which was such an attractive partner to us, because they manufacture 600,000 cars a month. And so advanced manufacturing, robotics, they know how to do things at scale. So learning from them over the past 12 months of things that we'll need to put into place was part of the reasoning for that partnership. So that's, we've learned a lot from that partnership, and we're looking forward to that. I would say the other thing is we chose Georgia as a state in the U.S. as our manufacturing site because of what the state offers from a training perspective. So they've given us incentives in which they will work with all of their technical colleges, trade schools, community schools to develop the curriculum for us that we can then put in place with these universities and send our people through. So that was the primary reason for us choosing that site.
I might add something here, that the word safety hasn't been mentioned yet, but it was in the previous panel, and I think it's really important to continue to emphasize that for the two reasons you mentioned, consumer acceptance and really just for the importance of safety overall. And so as we develop training, as we develop in something that's moving at a pretty fast pace right now, I mean, everything we do, has to have that at the top of the list. We stood up a safety center just in the last couple of years at Embry-Riddle, and Boeing is supporting it. It's a pretty significant undertaking to looking at safety operations for everybody that flies, no matter what it is, whether it's an aircraft, an autonomous vehicle, you name it, autonomously operated. So we're looking at all the different aspects of that, and it has its roots all the way back in the actual educating and training of the individuals who are making them, manufacturing them, operating them, maintaining them, et cetera. And so we have to keep that front and center. There's no question. Otherwise, the industry is going to have a real challenge when the consumer acceptance side.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. The end game is safety. What we've been doing with the regulators is essentially sharing with them as much as we can, as early as we can. So we're collecting a lot of data. We're developing new, innovative training devices that we think will be well adapted to this space. And we're doing a lot of tests, collecting a lot of data, and the intention is to share that data as early as possible with the regulators, to start having a conversation, to start demonstrating, the safety and the ability to train, the performance to train, and the efficacy to train with these devices. So I think what's key is to keep the regulators to work with them as closely as possible and as early as possible, as most of the stakeholders are doing today.
And I think that even though we are a new industry, we're looking at new ways to train, develop, attract, retain people. There are some non-negotiables, safety being one of them, that just has to be in the DNA of every single person who works in this industry. And I think the point on consumer acceptance is also really, really important. So, moving on to how we might attract people, if people aren't used to seeing our vehicles fly, if people aren't used to hearing about these, we need to make sure that there is that user acceptance, that this is something that is open to people, because this is where we can also attract from traditional aviation partners people who may want to join a more innovative, forward-looking industry as well.
And I'd say briefly, a lot of the engineers that are entering this domain are coming from the DoD or other defense agencies. They don't know anything about the FAA or EASA and certifying aircraft, and so in part it's training those engineers and even bringing on folks from the FAA, and you were talking about earlier. So Billy Nolan, who was the acting FAA administrator, is now working for Archer, right? And that's a great thing for them, because he's going to know a lot of things. I wouldn't say shortcuts, but he knows the people, he knows the processes, and that'll help some of these companies going forward. So we'll see that, I think, too.
If I could add maybe another point on this is, again, because it's sort of a startup in some ways in terms of, I wouldn't say startup, but kind of resetting how things are done. Training the trainer. There isn't that pipeline of instructors and others out there, and making sure that process is really done well is important. We turn over probably 90% of our instructors on an annual basis, and that scares a lot of people when you think about it. It's like, how can you do that? How can you train thousands of pilots at your university and be constantly turning over instructors? Well, we do it by having we have a safety record that's significantly better than the industry average, much better. And part of it is how you train those instructors. And we have a very thorough process so that they understand who that person is that's sitting next to them and how they're going to deal with them in that first, second, third, fourth flight, et cetera. So I think in this industry here, that's going to be critical. That otherwise, that whole pipeline of instruction is going to get turned upside down. And we don't want it any different than it is right now with the industry, because it's pretty good. It's just that we have to make sure that those lessons learned are transitioned into the new phase of what we're doing.
These are all really good points, and I'm sorry, I was remiss in mentioning that you can go to slido.com and put in the hashtag PASAM to ask questions, or just take a picture of the QR code. And we will be taking questions from the audience in just a little bit. But before I go there, going back, so what do the regulations require to become an advanced air mobility pilot or a mechanic? Has that been established yet?
So we are working with EASA, which is quite different to some other people, and it's 400 captain hours for the pilots. And in terms of the maintenance, etc., that has not yet been established. So we're working to the traditional regulation requirements, and obviously then we need to work and take advice from and consult with the regulators as we move forward to establish what exactly is required.
Yeah, and obviously the FAA for the U.S., just a couple of weeks ago, they came out with the SFAR, Special Federal Aviation Regulation, and it gave some insight into what they're expecting for pilots. And it looks fairly similar to what we would be expecting. So the infrastructure that we've already been putting in place, what is needed today, looks fairly similar with some nuances. However, it is open for public comment. And so, there will be, I think what you'll see is the eVTOL companies going back with some of their recommendations on what that should look like. As was mentioned for us, the great news with Billy joining our team is he has insight into how we need to navigate that process. So we're confident about our ability to do that.
Yeah, and I think, we will be commenting as well over the next 60 days through the channels that we have. But, from our perspective, the use of simulation has been recognized as something that's going to be critical to be able to develop the pilots. And that's something that's important to us, obviously, and something that's encouraging as well. Again, it's a new industry, but we've been training pilots for a long time, and we've trained a lot of them. CAE does about 1 million hours of training every year. So we're adapting, we're staying close to the regulators, and we're feeling good about what's coming.
Good. So how do you recruit and develop a workforce that is ready for these future requirements? And who are these people? Are they coming up from the industry? Eric, you had mentioned, there's already a pilot mechanic shortage, pretty much around the world. So now we're adding more people to a brand new industry.
Well, for us, it's everything. Manufacturing talent shortage, engineers, you name it, the whole sort of ecosystem of the workforce. So I think the answer to your question is yes. We should be recruiting from wherever we can. Former military, new entrants into the fields, converting people from flying something to something else, thinking creatively about people that are piloting things remotely. We need to be very expansive in how we, as big as possible, the opening part of that funnel. And we need to start early, too. We need to be recruiting and exciting kids about STEM. We run the world's largest rocketry challenge. The international finals are here at Le Bourget on Friday. And that's a way to keep middle schoolers and high schoolers interested and giving them challenges all the way through. In fact, we have scholarships. If any of those kids graduate and are accepted to Embry-Riddle, we have scholarships set up for when they get there. So it's thinking creatively about partnerships that keep kids interested all the way through the educational process to come on the outside. But it's not an either or, it's an all in terms of recruiting for what we need.
If I could add, Eric mentioned the military, and I think that's an important one that we all pay attention to. We at Embry-Riddle, we have a really great relationship with the Department of Defense, primarily on the maintainer side of things. And what it looks like right now is that as servicemen and women are close to finishing their terms, getting ready to leave the service, those at certain bases around the country, the United States, are assigned effectively to Embry-Riddle as students while they're still in uniform. And we take them and we put them through a fairly intense program to get them ready for the industry for when they leave the military. And it's been very successful. It's got a 98% placement rate so far. Now, that particular group that we're working with now are primarily going into power plant type operations. So they're coming from military jobs that have skill sets that really kind of set them up to move into the aircraft engine side of things. As we look forward to this industry, I see programs like that being sort of adapted to the types of skill sets that might be needed on the maintenance side, which might be a little different than a gas turbine engine. So, but there are job functions within the military that naturally set them up with some added training. It's through what's called tuition assistance through the Department of Defense. And then when they finish that last day in the military, they're ready to move on the next day into a job, and hopefully in this type of an industry. So we're looking forward to looking at that in the next coming months and years to see if that's an option that the DoD is willing to look at as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add, so Archer's headquarters is based in Silicon Valley, and obviously we have both backgrounds, aerospace and automotive. And with the electric powertrain, it's very difficult to attract top talent where we're at. We've got Tesla headquartered there, we've got Rivian, others, Lucid Motors. So that for us is very challenging. So I would say, we have had to put together a really attractive strategy on what that looks like. And Archer's mission, and hopefully you get this emotion and feeling when you look at the product, it's not just about saving people time, it's really about what happens once you've saved them time. You know, what kinds of things can they do that they could never do before? What kinds of people could they connect with? How could they be inspired by humanity again? And so we really try and bring that into the culture. And so from that, we essentially, our benefits program, we have free healthcare for our employees. We offer unlimited PTO once milestones have been met, and things like that to offer an attractive benefits program as we're pulling from some of these top electric V companies.
No, I'd like to add, we released our biannual aviation talent forecast last year. So we look at how many crew members will be needed for the next 10 years. And that's pilots, maintainers, and cabin crew. And it doesn't include advanced air mobility. And it's 1.3 million people, aviation personnel. And just to put that in perspective, today there are 1.2 currently operating. So we need more than what is existing today to be able to achieve. So it is a real challenge. And one thing I'll add to what Eric said earlier is, I think we have a real opportunity to start without some of the biases that exist today in commercial business aviation. You know, today it's a very low number of pilots that are women, and it doesn't make any sense really when we're struggling to find the talent that we need, and we're only tapping into half of the population. So here I think we have a real opportunity to create an industry without these biases, and that'll definitely help find the talent that we need.
I was going to add on the talent, you know, sort of the young person. That's mostly what we deal with. Person finishing college at the age of 22 or 23. We do career fairs twice a year, probably have 100, 110 companies there. And what we've noticed over the last 10 or 20 years is that the number of people, this is my unofficial version of what people are thinking about. I just go over and look at the lines. It's kind of like here, you look at how many people are in line to see different displays. I look at the lines for interviews, and the students are self-selecting, you know, based on what they've heard from you folks and what they see in the magazines and what they want to do. And in the last 10 years, commercial space has taken a lot of students. Those lines get longer and longer. And so now there's this balance between how many want to be in commercial space versus in the aviation world. And it's really interesting to see. I'm really anxious to see what happens when we start having, you know, folks from the companies in this part of the pavilion showing up and interviewing. And my sense is, based on just the excitement that's around, that those lines are going to get long pretty fast. But the challenge, as was said earlier, I think, is at the detriment of others. I mean, it's a zero-sum game, and unless we increase the size of the pool, as Simon said, it's just going to be different sectors of the industry kind of fighting for it, and that nobody wins in that situation. So you really do have to grow, and I fully support what you're saying. And there are people who are backing it, but not enough. We need more companies behind women, underrepresented individuals in the industry to get that pie bigger.
Absolutely. Lucy?
And I think this goes back to your point about getting it right from an early age. Most kids decide by the age of 8 what they want to be when they grow up. We need to be talking to kids even younger than that. So I think local grassroots initiatives bring STEM to girls, bring STEM to underprivileged people. That's really, really important. And I think as well, what's really exciting for me on a personal level working in this industry, Simon, like you said, diversity and inclusion, we have the opportunity to get this right. We are building this from the ground up. We need to make sure that every single person feels that they would be welcome and represented in the industry that we're in. And that's also really important as we look to attracting and retaining the correct talent.
So to add to the conversation, I'm actually fairly optimistic. So I am talking to the kids. Through Vertical Flight Society, we have a great connection with the different universities, the Vertical Lift Research Centers of Excellence. And talking to the kids, they all want to be entrepreneurs, and they're all excited about Archer and Joby. And I've been actually warning some of the executives at Bell and Boeing, like, they're not going to want to go out to Texas and work for you guys and work on, tinker with something for their entire career. They want to go work for some of these exciting new electric aircraft companies. And so with that, yeah, we have, only so many kids that we're graduating every year. And I'm hearing some good things from the different universities. For example, the University of Maryland is kind of opening and expanding the number of aerospace electives for the kids to take. so they can introduce some of these new courses in electric drivetrain design, for example, which is lacking, and we definitely need more kids that understand that, because it is almost a completely different application than with cars, right? You're working at very high voltages, high discharge rates with the batteries. It's a different and exciting problem, and so we need to train those kids.
Can I add also one more thing? We're in constant conversations with airlines about their pilots, and what's interesting is, this offers, a pathway as well for pilots in certain instances through these airlines, or with these airlines, through different parts of their career. So it hasn't been stipulated yet by the authorities how counting hours will be taking place, but there's an opportunity there where pilots can start or transition to AAM throughout their careers. And I think by doing that, you don't compete with commercial aviation in that demand today, but it falls in with it, and perhaps an opportunity there too.
Well, we're right between Archer and Volocopter. We've got the chief people, right here. It's been interesting. I did it too. Like when I walked in on Monday, I'm like, wow, this is so cool. You get to stand and take your picture, and seeing so many people taking selfies and having their picture, next to your vehicles. Do you have a queue with like, hey, do you want to come work for us? Are you signing up people?
Absolutely. We're always signing up people. Thank you, Leanne. Oh, absolutely. I'm definitely around the rest of the day. We're hiring all positions still. I think we have 234 openings right now. Archer is 600 people today, 234 openings. And then as I mentioned earlier, we'll really be, after we close out these 234, moving more towards the manufacturing workforce. So certainly stop by.
And we are already hiring production people for our facilities in Bruxelles. And I think importantly as well, we're flying. So we're flying here this week. We're flying today at 1:14 out in the airfield. So do feel free to come by and see us, see what it's like, experience it. And I think that's a big step forward. Tasha and I were just talking about this. This is a step forward for everyone in this industry to see the actual vehicles fly. So really excited about that today too.
Yep, and I just found out about this before the panel, and it takes me about 15 minutes to walk that way. So if we want to, we can just leave. We'll end about 5 minutes early. So just in case you want to see that 1:14 flight for the Volocopter.
Yeah.
Deal? Okay. So keep the questions flying. Okay, I'm going to switch to audience questions. How does social acceptance affect training demand and student interest?
Maybe if it's from the perspective of social acceptance of the idea of putting my kids, I have a 6-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a newborn, and putting them in an Archer aircraft and having them take off and go to maybe, Martha's Vineyard, we're doing a hop from Hyannisport to Martha's Vineyard. Do I feel comfortable with that? Do I feel like the aircraft is safe? I think we're making a lot of progress. I've been told by some stakeholders within the Vertical Flight Society, they feel more comfortable and confident flying an electric aircraft than they do in general aviation, in a fixed-wing aircraft. Because of the lengths that these companies have had to go to prove to the FAA and EASA that they have what it takes to fly and fly safely. I think they've done quite a bit.
I was just going to add, I think it's definitely going to be a challenge. Part of how we're solving it is our partnership with United Airlines. The reason that we wanted to take a direct sell business model for United was to help gain that consumer confidence. When you see an Archer aircraft branded United and United is using it, it gives this social acceptance of, oh, okay, I know you said it was going to be just as safe, but now I really believe it because United Airlines is using it. So that was part of the rationale behind that. And we hope that we also leverage talent from United to be able to continue that acceptance.
Yeah, speaking about Volocopter and EASA, we will be certified to the same level as a commercial jet. And we all know that that is one of the safest ways to get around. So, and again, this public demonstration of what it is that we do, we want to really work on user acceptance, consumer acceptance across the industry.
I work a lot with young people, and you sort of can understand sometimes what drives them. I think in any dimension of aviation, I don't know how much they're too worried about that, quite honestly. I'll give you an example. In the height of COVID, when about every aircraft in the world was sitting on a ramp somewhere, we saw, I think, a 10 or 15% increase in applications into professional piloting, maintenance, and other areas. In other words, their lookout on the ramp at all these planes didn't tell them, oh, this is an industry I better stay away from. They're their passion was driving them to say, I want to do this, and it's going to work out. It's kind of like, it'll all work out down the road. I think in some ways, this industry, this part of the industry, particularly for younger people, is going to be the same. I think you're going to see people that are just excited, as we said earlier, and they may say, well, we're not sure who's going to be around in 10 years because it's a competitive market right now, but they're not thinking too much that way. They just have a passion, and I think that's the key word that drives it. So we've seen increases in enrollments for the last 5 years, and even in the middle of times when it was really bad out there for the industry. So I have a pretty good feel that we're going to see that coming.
That's good for all of us. Thank you. Next question. There's talk about women getting underrepresented in aviation, and yet, wow. Okay, so I'm going to skip that one, but we definitely do need more people. With such revolutions in aircraft and operating models, are operators thinking equally revolutionary about how they staff?
So I guess different.
Yeah, so I think there's such differences in these aircraft compared to what's flying today. Are you looking at staffing in a different way, maybe from a recruiting, training, workforce engagement?
I mean, I can think of one example that stands out to me quickly, which is maintenance. I mean, when you think of the traditional maintenance, it's 75% mechanical, 25% software avionics, and we're basically flipped, right? So when you look at the workforce that you're recruiting, you're looking more for the software avionics from a maintenance perspective and less on the mechanical side. That's just one that jumps out to me of how the staffing might look different.
I think we just did a study with PwC, and it's clear that industry writ large and companies have to think differently about how they do it. There's lots of experimentation out there. It was pushed forward a whole generation by what we went through with COVID. But that's one of the things we have to work around, certainly on the manufacturing side, is COVID taught people, or seemingly taught people, that they want this flexible hybrid environment, which is harder to do when you're tethered to a manufacturing floor. But there are things we can do to think about different types of career paths, beginning, middle, and end, different developmental opportunities, not one size fitting all for your workforce, for one company over the other. So I think the technology is not the only thing that's going to be the competitive advantage for people. It is going to be thinking through these workforce challenges.
Yeah, and crew members today have to travel a lot, right? And so we know that it's a challenge, especially at certain parts of one person's life. And I think here we're dealing with crew members that can come home every night. Right? It's not to say it won't be challenging, but at least you're home every night. And that, I think, will be interesting for crew members at different parts of their career. And we do it a lot today with instructors. We have people who fly, and there's a time where they say, well, I don't want to fly anymore. I mean, I don't want to be away from home for the next couple of years. We take them on as instructors, and that's very appealing. I think we're going to have, well, I'd imagine we'd have the same with this type of profile and of job.
I think the comment about the maintainers and the flip, I think a couple comments there. Number one is the auto industry has experienced this in the last 5 years with electric vehicles in terms of maintainers and the skill sets that they need. And I think there's a lot to be learned from how they've evolved. The person working at pick your favorite company, Tesla or something, versus a more traditional one. So I think there's some lessons learned there. But in our programs, even up till now, before what we're looking at now, things have evolved. I mean, we've had to put in our aviation maintenance programs, we've had to put in lessons on cybersecurity. We've had to put in lessons on fiber optics. We've had to put in lessons on, years ago, sort of advanced glass avionics, things like that. And so there have been these evolutionary changes, and the educators, I think, have been able to adjust, and continue to hopefully provide the right content. A lot of that is based on feedback from the industry. We have industry advisory boards that come in and tell us, hey, you need to do more on aviation cybersecurity, and we do it. We try our best. And so I think this feedback loop from the folks who are making these, people who are trying to get them out there and sell them, and those of us who educate whether it's the operators or the maintainers, I think that's really important. That level of communication is critical.
So how many of you are working with, Eric, you mentioned working with the younger kids. Like how many of you are working with the younger kids on STEM subjects? So that's already happening, okay. Very good. Just because I promised an early departure, any final comments, things that workforce related that I should have asked you that I didn't?
No, I just think, with 1.3 million new aviation personnel required in the next 10 years, it's a very exciting time to join the industry as a pilot or as a maintainer. So, that's what I'd leave with.
I would just say safety again, as I said earlier. Safety is really important in everything we do. And secondly, comments have been made about sort of radical changes. Yes, they look radically different, but the industry over 100 years has gone through changes in different parts. And so I think the industry has done really well in terms of adapting over time. And so I'm not sure if radical is a necessary word, but evolutionary, but it's kind of a big step in evolution. But I think we've done a good job over the years in adjusting.
So I would speak to the engineers, and I've been talking to a few that are working for some of these companies, and it's funny when they talk about their interview and they ask, like, have you ever worked in electric aviation before? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, you're hired, great. Because it is in bringing in folks that have similar backgrounds or understand some of that, but they're also going to have to learn. I'm not going to say they're going to start from scratch. We're talking about an aerospace engineer, all the aerospace and aerodynamics coursework they took. They're not starting from scratch, but it's important for them to not only be open and accepting to change, to learn some of these new disciplines, but to also be a little bit business savvy, because a lot of these engineers are coming from maybe the defense sector where things can kind of operate a little slower, and you got to get a product out to market. And so I think maybe some of these engineers, just speaking to them, coming into this domain, be a little bit more business savvy when you're thinking about your design. And you don't need to tinker and make something perfect as far as optimizing, but getting a product that's safe to market is going to be important as we grow in this industry.
I answer that from a U.S. perspective since I'm a U.S. Industry Association, but to me this is a whole of country effort. It's in the interest of the United States to have innovation like this, to develop the workforce for it, to make sure the regulatory framework is in place. We want to do everything we can to encourage this and knock down the barriers, making sure that safety is always first.
Yeah, and to the point of learning, for some of these roles, we're looking for people that actually have never done this before. And so, I think for us, and probably for you guys too, it's really around finding individuals that love creative problem solving and entrepreneurial spirit and really see the mission of this and coming together. And I think we talked about that when we did our panel prep of what I love is I watched a Volocopter fly yesterday and just, it's great for the industry. It's phenomenal. And we want to see that across all of us. So really supporting each other.
Yeah, can only agree. And I think, the opportunity is there. I don't have any aviation background, and I found Volocopter entirely by chance and kind of fell in love. And they can't get me out now. I'm definitely going to be part of this story. And I think we just need people who want to be in innovation. They want to have that entrepreneurial spirit. And yes, obviously, then we need to bring in people with more traditional engineering backgrounds and marry them all together in order to deliver what it is that we need to do.
Well, recruiting people outside of the industries will help us get to the,
1.3 million over 10 years.
Okay, 1.3. And, on a side note, so many people want Volocopter to succeed next year at the Paris Olympics, including me. I'm
Thank you.
Go. And I think it's really cool that there's this cooperative spirit. It needs to succeed and to carry forward. So anyway, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for the questions. And enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll be back here tomorrow, I believe, at 9:45. Any final words? No? Okay, very good. Well, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day. See you back here at 9:45 tomorrow.